Hi, I'm Preston Williams, and welcome to another edition of Jazz Talk. Today on our show, we have with us a consummate musician. This gentleman has been on the scene for over 45 years and has worked with many greats from Steve Gadd to Peter Erskine, Wayne Shorter, Herbie Hancock, and Jaco Pastorius, to name a few. He is a guitarist, composer, arranger, and a pretty good pilot, I hear. Please welcome to Jazz Talk, Mr. Randy Bernsen. Welcome, sir.
Preston, great to see you, and I'm so glad we could do this in this crazy time. But it really made my day when you sent me that message. So
thank you so much, my friend. Well, Randy, I was curious to know more about your humble beginnings and your background. I understand that you're from Massachusetts, and what, you grew up in Florida, something like that?
Yes. Real quick, grew up in a place called Dover, Mass, which is southwest of Boston. And again, I'll try to go quick as I can, but it's still an interesting little story. 12 years old, and what was happening? Beatles, the Cream, everything. And my buddies had a guitar. His father was a doctor. My mother couldn't afford any instruments, but the doctor saw my interest and he bought me my first guitar. God bless him, But of course, the deal was I was going to mow his yard for the next 40 years or something like that. I think I did it 3 times. But one of the really great things that I just fondly remember is 20 years later to go back to Dover and give him my first international record with Herbie, Jaco, and everybody else on it. I mean, it was, we were both crying. It was really a great moment. Yeah. But that's how it started. And so, the Beatles, it's a big influence to me, like so many people, for melody. What happened to melody these days?
Yes.
So then you translate that to a guy like Wes Montgomery, and that's all he was melody. That dude to play a blues, and it was like a Rachmaninoff symphony. So those were important days that are still here with me.
Yeah. So, Randy, how did you get into playing guitar? I mean, what age did you start? And obviously, you're talking about some influences. I mean, Wes Montgomery had a big influence, of course, on a lot of guitarists, including Pat Metheny, who we just mentioned. But why guitar? Why'd you pick the guitar?
Well, again, to go back there, I was 12 years old, and that's what was happening. The Beatles, they all had guitars, but I think my first emulation was probably Eric Clapton. Cream had come out, Disraeli Gears, and still you think about that solo on Crossroads. I mean, that should be in the time capsule. It really should be melodically sound, and the guitar was it just made sense, and it's made sense ever since. It's been a wonderful love affair for a lot of years.
For a lot of years, yeah. So Randy, growing up, I guess when you were in your mid-teens, you were playing in local clubs in Florida during that time?
Well, in Dover, in Massachusetts, I was there till I was 15.
Okay.
I think my first gig was at 14 at a church there, local church, I'm told, But then coming to Florida, yes, I mean, I started gigging, I think when I was 15 or 16 in clubs. And that's where I first met Jaco down here in Fort Lauderdale. We were both, he was 2 years older than me. So, those are the 17 years old, man, and Jaco was an old man at 19 years old. So
you bring up his name, man. It just brings back so many memories. I still look at him as the greatest bass player of all time. He just revolutionized the instrument. But I guess during that time when you were going to University of Miami, a lot of great artists were attending school during that time. I think Pat was there with him. You had Hiram Bullock, Bobby Watson, Bruce Hornsby. Were you there with all those guys at that time?
Oh yeah.
Wow.
I mean, and I remember our guitar class with a guy named Stan Samoli, who taught it, who's in Canada, really great teacher and great guitar player. But Steve Morris, Hiram Bullock, who's the guy that played with Bruce Hornsby? Peter, he's going to shoot me for not remembering. Ross Trout, but there were 5 or 6, 7 people that kept playing music and did okay for each other. But that age group, you mentioned, Metheny, we're all around the 65, 66 years old. And, Schofield and them. I mean, the Beatles were there. Wes Montgomery was the natural inspiration from that. But the Miami time was really great. That's 20, we were in our 20s and just on fire. We were all sponges. It was such a great environment. Again, I don't know if school by itself can teach you anything. It can provided for me an environment to really study with like minds, you know.
Yeah.
It was really a great time for composition to discover. I think I wrote my first big band chart when I was like 18 years old. It was still played today. So yeah, the early years were great. And that's when we were gigging every night. You know, I'd go to a gig and come home at 5 a.m. in the morning, and then go to high school, you know, and, you know, God bless my parents. I don't know why they let me do it, but you know, that's a great role. I think if a parent can recognize the child or offspring has a real gravity to something, I think that's the greatest thing you can do to lead them to it, unless it's, well, you know, whatever, it's not so good. But my parents said, go for it. And I'm still alive today, Preston, my Lord.
Man, that's beautiful. Hey, Randy, let me ask you, what was your perception of Jaco when you first met him? Because, you know, I've heard so many stories, and Pat Metheny was saying, you know, Jaco back then, he said the stories that he hears about Jaco, you know, toward the end doesn't line up with the guy that he knew growing up. He said Jaco was clean. He didn't drink during that time. He was a family man. And people were just so in awe of him the first time they heard him. But what was your perception of him when you first met him and you heard him play?
That really is a great question, not just about Jaco the musician, but as just a fellow human being, you know?
Yeah.
Again, we were both young, 17, 19. And I had heard about this guy. There was another guy in town playing bass that was real flashy, that would play and do this kind of thing. And then they say, but there's another guy in town that can play 3 notes and it'll change your world. What does that mean? You know? So lo and behold, I was at a club again 1 million years ago in Dania, which is near Fort Lauderdale, Miami, in Hollywood, Florida. And an afternoon gig watching a band called the Impact of Brass, whatever it was. I'm sitting on the side of the stage during the day, you know, this is a day gig, and this weird guy starts walking up to me, you know, hunched over, and I'm kind of like looking around like this, like something's different here. And he goes, hey man, I saw you playing at the Flying Club, at the Flying V, which was the name of the club back then. Flying something. And man, you play pretty good. Let's get together and play. And then that started a relationship that was, you know, just fantastic. Musically, with the family down in the University of Miami days, he would stay with me on the weekends there as he was teaching. And that's a whole nother episode. But that's how I met him. So he really was that, playing sports, never had a beer, almost laughed at people that had a beer. And that's what we did, music, sports, a great basketball player, football. He didn't really have the greatest form, but he had to get the job done, you know, as he would say in music, wrong and strong, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I remember hearing the first story when he kind of, you know, post weather report, then things were more partying and all that kind of thing. Okay. You know, he just exploded. Music's still great. Now the music back then, Preston, was like really unworldly.
Yeah.
I mean, he could play 2 or 3 notes and something hit you on the side of the head that you have not been whacked on before. It was just something, just his truth about what he was doing. He was so straight ahead on everything, leaning forward, you know, music as a person, kind person. He was kind. But I'll never forget that time when I heard, you know, things had changed. I didn't believe it. You're out of your mind. You're crazy. Impossible. Then I had a gig up in New York with Othello Molino.
Oh, yeah.
And during the day rehearsal, Jaco comes in, you know, with a tuxedo and I think some dog. And man, something was different. You know, The rest is stories and details. And at the very end, he came back and we had a group together in Fort Lauderdale, renamed it the Holy Ghost. And then 2 or 3 months, I called Ricky Schultz from Warner Bros. At the time to come down, and there was a lot of hope, and then it just fell apart after that.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it goes on and on,
You know, you guys played together in the Peter Graves Orchestra, man. Tell me about that group.
Well, I mean, Peter Graves, so responsible, or as a portal for the many people that Jaco met, starting at Boucher's 3, the club, and Blood, Sweat, and Tears came in. Bobby, the drummer, I guess met Jaco there, and then that kind of started with Blood, Sweat, and Tears, and then the record deal came through there.
Yeah.
And the rest is history. But some great stuff. Peter Graves provided an environment for Jaco's writing, and he was experimental and, never went to school, of course, but the harmony and everything just made sense to him. He worked very well with Larry Warlow, who's a guy that notated a lot of, Jaco could write his own music, of course, notation, etc. But it was an exciting time. Peter Graves, he really provided an environment for Jaco, and actually all of us. I had a few charts that I get to do, and we got to experiment, and so many great cats came through there. Mark Colby, that recently left us there.
Yeah.
It was an interesting time.
Yeah.
Great time. I miss him.
Yeah, you also played, you went on to play with Blood, Sweat, and Tears. Was that through your association with Bobby, Columbia, and Jaco? Because at mid-70s, you played with them too for a little bit.
Oh, yeah. Started there, and where did I meet Mike Stern first? Probably Blood, Sweat, and Tears. So I became friends with Stern, and Stern was going through a challenging time in his life, as we know. Yeah. And he said, man, you want the gig. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this much longer. So he recommended me for the gig, which was great. A good time.
Yeah. I had him on the show too. Yeah, interesting guy. We talked about a lot of different things. Now, one of the things, you talk about composing, and I noticed that crew of people like yourself, Stern, Matheny, Jaco, all of you guys are just incredible composers. And I wanted to talk to you, man, about your debut recording, Music for Planets, People and Washing Machines. Tell me about that. How'd you even come up with a title like that, Randy? Very interesting, but I could tell from the first time I heard you, I said, this guy's got something, man. I said, who is this Randy Bernsen? Because the title alone just sucks you in. But tell me about that. How'd you even come up with that title?
I can't remember, I don't know, but it probably is the best title I ever wrote. You know what I mean? I keep trying to come up with something nice, but it doesn't happen. It's, that's an interesting observation. It's because those musicians you mentioned, besides just being fantastic instrumentalists, they're all composers.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And today and around, there were so many great instrumentalists and stuff. Where are the really great composers?
Exactly.
So that's a good question. Is how and why did that happen with that generation? With that group? I don't know. I just know that when I started playing guitar at 12 years old, I picked up the classical guitar. So that was a great introduction to composition and melody and stuff. But I just always have been writing music. What does writing music mean? Writing music to me means practicing, making a mistake and saying, what the hell was that? Going over that. Oh, okay. So there's many hats in composition, right? There's the arresting of an inspirational point. Then the other hat is development of that.
Yeah.
And then the other hat, which supersedes all hats, is whatever you want to call it, the perseverance. That, I think, separates someone from a writer to a non-writer, because everybody has good and great ideas. It's the person that sticks with it. And why do you stick with it? I think that's, I don't know, organic. Now I'm sounding a little foo-foo here, but
yeah,
it's something you just got to do. And you can't live with yourself if you don't keep working on it and finishing it. So
Randy, you're actually in that class when I talk about brilliant composers. And I remember Jerry Jamont, when he was interviewing Jaco on his instructional video, he said to you, to him that your playing is fantastic, but it's like as a composer, it's almost like your writing goes way beyond your bass playing, you know, like Charles Mingus, Pat Metheny's like that, and you're like that. And I wanted to talk to you about your next recording, Mo Wasabi. Dude, let me tell you something. You wrote a song on there to this day, which is one of my favorite songs of all time, and no joke, I play it almost every day. What Once Was.
Bro, I just got, I'm still,
Gosh, man.
my head is going, I mean, I got goosebumps and everything. Yeah.
Dude, that
Yeah.
song knocks me out. Yesterday, you know, for Thanksgiving, I was with my brother-in-law. He's a big jazz buff like me. And I told him, he said, you going to have Randy Bernsen on? I said, Randy's going to be on tomorrow. And we started talking about California and What Once Was. That is like one of my all-time favorite songs. It's so beautiful. Makes you want to cry when you listen to it. I'm like, man, what was Randy thinking when he wrote this? I said, listen to this song and how beautiful it is. And it reminds me also of Jaco's song, Three Views of a Secret. Just the way that you guys wrote and composed. It's like all of you guys have that. Same thing with Metheny too. I've talked to Bobby Watson, Carmen Lundy. All of them are like the same way. It's just, you guys are just incredible writers. Forget playing an instrument. You guys could just make it as composers. But what is that song all about? What Once Was?
Bro, I can't remember, you know. I mean, I'm sure it may have been about some kind of love that didn't work out. You know, it sure sounds like it. Obviously, I'm not a lyricist at all. I mean, music for planets, people, and washing machines.
Yeah.
But how poignant is that? It's just as catchy, you know.
Yeah.
But I'm sure it was something, you know, a love come and gone, you know. And of course, during that time, we were all mixing. I mean, he was the one that first brought to my attention Toots Thielemans, you know, and that song,
man.
you know, and so that, of course, the song is in 3/4. Thank God, you know, when I'm writing music, I'm not thinking I've got to fit it in this form. I'm not thinking it's going to do this and a ballad that, and I love it today, Preston, because I remember my 3 records with MCA, and God bless Ricky Schultz. He never really said, you know, this is what we got to do. He recognized the talent in me and let me go, which is really, really great. So I never really pigeonholed myself, and no one ever really made me do that. But I am so excited in my career now because it, you know, anything goes today.
Yeah.
And it's very hard for anyone to even want to pigeonhole you because they can't afford to pigeonhole you, for one.
That's right.
So, I mean, I just did, what was the last thing I did? I'm loving putting out one song at a time. I do it at home with my pro equipment. You know, it goes on CD Baby and my Pandora channel and everything else. So as a composer, I feel great, and I've become comfortable in my own skin and excited to know that my time left on the planet will be done writing and composing. You know, I'm comfortable with that because there's an environment that supports it. It sure ain't about making the money. It sure is about making the soul, you know? So, I mean, I've done an electronic tune recently. I just released a blues tune that was kind of fun. I got some more ballads coming up. I'm working with the bass player in France, and we're doing these Instagram shorts, which is a lot of fun, 1 minute, 2 minutes. So I'm just out of my mind.
Man,
you know?
you're doing it all. And like I said, the thing that blew me away about that recording, Randy, you had everybody on it. Most people don't put out a recording with those heavy hitters. You had Peter Erskine, Steve Gadd, Jaco, Wayne Shorter, Herbie Hancock. I mean, it's going to be good, but just the songs were just tremendous, and I still listen to it. I guess you made that in, I think, 86 or 85 or something like that, and I still play it almost every day. That song just blows me away.
You made my day. You made my day. And let me tell you, when Toots recorded it, he goes, Randy, we're going to make the world cry on this one. I'll never forget it. Put him up in New York, you know. Toots, oh man, I treasured that relationship.
It was great.
Relationship.
It was great, man. And also wanted to ask you, you know, I guess you were hooked up and later on, I guess in the 90s, you worked with the late Joe Zawinu of Weather Report. How did that collaboration come about, man? What another great musician. I mean, Weather Report, he and Wayne Shorter. Woo.
Well, you know, 17 years old, you know, Weather Report was going on. And, you know, if you had the ears to hear, it just blew you away. In fact, let me go back a second.
Okay.
I remember I heard Tony Williams' Lifetime
Oh, man, Tony.
with John McLaughlin and them.
Larry Young,
That
yeah.
was a paradigm shift. I can actually say that when I heard that, my whole world changed. I
Wow.
didn't know why. I didn't know what. It didn't matter.
Yeah.
Still doesn't matter. But I remember in a present, I'm going to ask you if you had a record like that. But I put that thing on. I played it all day. There was a fascination with, I think jazz, the improvisation, the pure spirit of what's happening.
Yeah.
It resonated with me. It just
Yeah.
resonated with me. And that was it for me. Now, what about you? Do you have a record like that, bro?
Dude, I got several of them. John Coltrane, "The Love Supreme," still moves me. Also, Miles Davis, "Bitches Brew." And I don't know if you're familiar with the great arranger. He was in that same league as Quincy Jones. He passed away, Charles Stepney. He actually discovered Minnie Riperton, and they did an album called "Come to My Garden," which is beautiful.
I don't know it, but
I highly
you're
recommend it.
recommending that. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
But yeah, like I said, Tony Williams is so funny. Randy, just about every musician or drummer that I've had on the show, Tony keeps coming up. Peter's talked about him. Lenny White, all of them just look at Tony as like, the greatest. He's like the guy. Miles talked about him too. But yeah, Lifetime, Emergency, I believe that was their debut. Yeah. And I talked to John McLaughlin was on the show. We talked about working with Tony and Miles.
I want to hear that one. I want to hear.
Yeah.
I'm going to check that McLaughlin.
Yeah, McLaughlin is great. We had some interesting stuff, and I think he, the guitarist, is it Jimmy Page of Led Zeppelin? He actually gave him lessons. He taught him a lot back in the 60s.
Hey man, who taught who?
McLaughlin taught Jimmy Page.
No kidding.
Gave him lessons. Yeah, you'll hear about it when you watch the interview. Oh yeah, McLaughlin is great, man. I mean, like I said, and yeah, it was the two recordings that would probably do that to me is Coltrane, "A Love Supreme," Miles Davis, of course, "Kind of Blue," still one of them. But yeah, there's certain pivotal moments in music where you just like hear something. And even Mahavishnu Orchestra, the Intermounting Flame, that blew me away when I first heard that.
Oh, that was. How about the first time you saw them live?
I never got a chance to see them live. I saw Return to Forever, but I never got a chance to see Mahavishnu. And you know what? I don't know if you know this story, and Lenny White confirmed it with me. Stanley Clarke in Chick Corea went to see the Mahavishnu Orchestra, blew them away, and they just looked at each other. And from that point on, they turned electric. As a result of seeing Mahavishnu Orchestra, they turned electric, seeing McLaughlin and those guys.
Well, yeah. President, as you said, Mahavishnu Orchestra, when you heard them. Now, imagine going now to multimedia 4K to see them. I mean, I'm surprised people are still alive. That was a visitation from another planet. That was it really was something. I love these moments, but that's because we have the ears to hear, and everybody does. I mean, everybody resonates to something else. Someone resonates to country music and stuff. But we're having this conversation because we're got similar ears at some point, so it's great.
Yeah,
love it.
Yeah. I was going to ask you also. You've done some stuff recently, I guess, over the last few years or so, with great bassist Jimmy Haslip of the Yellow Jackets. What is it like working with Jimmy, man?
Jimmy is such a great brother. Just a gentle soul. Very creative. Bass players, man, I've always said they're the salt of the earth. They're the first guys that get married. They know how to fix a car, and Jimmy Haslip is just the greatest. And we talk, I don't know, 3 or 4 times a year, and he always tells me he really loves Grace Notes, the one that we did together.
Yeah.
And did a great job recommending musicians and getting people together and working with him, because I would fly out to LA maybe 8 or 9 times. And it was so great, man. I financed that myself. I just wish I could do it again, Yeah.
It's so funny. Randy, I was just going to say, all these guys are so interconnected. You think about Jimmy because he knew Jaco too and studied a little bit with him. But all these guys, like I said, Matheny, Jaco, John McLaughlin, Tony Williams. It's like all of these cats sort of played together and knew each other. Because Jaco, remember that group trio of doom that they had for a while, Tony Williams and John McLaughlin, that short-lived group. But yeah, all these guys are just connected with one another. But one of the things that I wanted to ask you, man, I'm very curious about, how did you become a pilot? How did you get involved in doing something like that? You know, guitar extraordinary Randy Bernsen is flies planes, man. Tell me about that.
Well, I mean, I think all kids at some point thought, saw the fascination for a minute. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And once again, I go back to what separates someone from doing something. It's the tenacity or just the attraction, and staying with it, focus. Well, that seed was planted years ago when I was a kid. Just, oh man, that's, wow. I mean, maybe one day. Never grew from there, but heading off the road with Zawinul, and I do want to go. I mean, we got to go back to Zawinul for a second. We glanced over him, and he's looking down from heaven. I think heaven. No, I know heaven. And going, hey man, what? But I got off the road with Joe, had some money in my pocket, and broke up. I had a relationship I broke up from, and it just thought came to me, man, I got to revisit this. I just gonna try something else out. And the flying bug was still in me. One of my guitar students was a flight instructor, interesting enough. So he got me started and I just loved it. But before that, I was doing flight simulator on computer, and I pretty much learned how to fly on computer, like so many people.
Really?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. At least the basics, the philosophies, the numbers.
Yeah.
So get it in the airplane. Wow, this is cool. And I took my time, and instrument flying is the next natural progression. Okay, I'll do that. Then I met a guy at church that was a Top Gun instructor for the Navy and also a American Airlines captain. He said, why don't you get your multi-instrument in commercial? Okay. He goes, did you get the airplane? I'm not going to charge him. So I remember sitting in the back of a twin engine when the first time I sat back twin engine with him, and all these dials and stuff. I had already had my private pilots, and I said, bro, I'm just a single engine kind of guy, but thanks anyway. Years later, I end up flying the only 4-engine business jet made that people used in the business world. It was made by Lockheed, made for the military brass, and they built it in the 60s and 70s. And then they said, well, what are we going to do with these things? Well, so they sold them to the public. But it was just, I recall that sitting in the back of the airplane of a twin engine and saying, oh, this is too much for me. And then ending up flying the only 4-engine business jet made, so it's been an interesting career. It was not a conscious thing. Crescent, it's one foot in front of the other. Yeah, I'll get my instrument. Okay, well, thanks, Ed. I've got my commercial. And then a buddy of mine, how did this work? He was great guitar player named Angelo Diana, God bless him. Also a hairdresser. He calls me up and he says, hey man, I got someone sitting in my seat, and if he doesn't stop crying, I'm gonna cut his ears off right now. Well, what can I do for you? He's looking for pilots. Well, why are you calling me? I mean, I never thought about doing it as a gig, right? So he goes, hey, listen, we're flying Learjets. I went, whoa. He goes, I'll pay for half your training. You pay for the half. I said, I'm a musician. He goes, I know who you are. He goes, man, work when you want to work.
Wow.
Okay. So again, Preston, as I said, I'm not smart enough to figure this whole thing out. One foot in front of the other and blah, 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 blah. And now I'm flying this new Honda jet, which is just great and exciting as a contract pilot, meaning I can say to the client, no, thank you. I'm going to stay and finish my music. Thank you very much. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that's after 23 years of a flying career that have been snuggled my way into that,
Wow, that's so incredible, man. I'm blown away by that. I was surprised when I initially talked to you, and I'm like, what did you say, Randy? You're a pilot? That I didn't know. I also saw you, I guess about 5 years ago in the Jaco documentary, Jaco the film. I was watching. I said, oh, there's Randy. It's good. And I was wondering, because as I watched, I says, the guy had just about everyone in it. But I says, I'm surprised that Pat Metheny wasn't in this of all people. I guess maybe he couldn't get everyone, but I thought it was a great documentary they did on Jaco, and they told the story. It was really good stuff. And I wanted to ask you, when you're just home relaxing, Randy, just taking it easy, maybe having a glass of wine, what is Randy Bernsen listening to? What artists do you put on? I mean, are you listening to some old stuff, new stuff, or tell me what your playlist would consist of? What is Randy listening to right now?
Well, this morning, let's go to real time. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Real
Okay.
time was Alexa, play birds chirping in a serene forest.
Okay.
So that goes on for a half an hour, and
Right.
then Alexa, play Gregorian chant, and that
Mm.
goes on for the next half hour.
Okay. Okay.
And then that's before I went to church this morning. And came back, and so I really, when I listen, I do stuff like that. I love classical.
Oh yeah.
I love, of course, Miles. So I'll put so many different things on, Marcus. And then I love to let my friends, I love to, Preston, I love to barbecue. It's
Oh
probably
yeah.
just an excuse to hang, and Florida's great. And my third floor, I wish I could show you my third floor deck is out there, and it faces, and I love to have my friends play their music, you know what I mean? Because it's music I won't play. So therefore I learn other stuff around. So I'm listening to everything and anything, and I honk on, like probably you and everybody else, different artists at different times.
Yeah.
It'd be the Schofield thing, Matheny, it's just one of the greatest composers and
Oh yeah.
players, as well
Yeah.
as sculptors. And on YouTube today, or on Facebook, I'm almost gonna stop following, this thing with a fusion guitarist or something. Bro, there's 20 million of them,
That's right.
and they're all 9 or 10 years old, and they're wingling, dingling their fingers, and it sounds great. It's in time and everything. And I said, well, great. There's nothing left to do. Hence, I wish there was a channel or something where people could be exposing their writing or something different, some creative thing,
You just made me think of something. I had Al Di Meola on about a couple of months ago, and he was talking about something similar. He says, there's so many guitarists, they play fast and they do all this, but he says, how many of them can really compose? He says, I don't really do too much of that anymore as far as how I used to play really fast. He says, it's more about writing and composing. He's interested in that. And you think about you think about one of the greatest composers around today, Wayne Shorter, brilliant.
Another goosebumps, bro. More
Yeah.
goosebumps.
Oh yeah, and that's what I'm saying. You had him on your recording, but
That was just
so many
awesome.
greats. Now, I was going to ask you, Randy, in your spare time or whenever you have time, do you teach? A lot of musicians. I was talking to Mike Stern. He actually teaches online, and many musicians, of course, during the quarantine are doing that because they're not gigging. But do you teach it all online or offer any courses?
No, I mean, I don't, and I should. People have been asking me to do that and stuff, and I would love to do some kind of book, but everything's been done already. All the books are out, but if I did a book, it would be some talking about improvisation, some ideas. Then we'd go to some of my favorite quotes from composers, from storybook, maybe portions out of great philosophy books, maybe a few recipes. That's the kind of book that I would do. I do have a few students, not consistently. I don't pursue it. Every time I do it, I say, man, I know I'm learning. I need to give this guy $50 because I learned so much doing it. It's such a great thing. I feel a responsibility. So, there's a season for everything, the time. And I know that season probably will be coming up for me shortly.
Yeah.
To really devote it and seek it. And these guys, they get their channels and they get their Zoom things going and really make a thing like that. I mean, I wouldn't do it for financial reasons. I do it because I'd have to do it,
Yeah.
But good question.
Yeah. Do you think we'll ever see maybe a biography on Randy Bernsen in the near future? Because you've had quite an illustrious career, man. All the stuff that you've done, the people that you've played with, there's a lot to talk about.
Well, sadly, like I'm saying, I mean, I've always felt I've been on the side and I've rubbed shoulders with, I have rubbed shoulders with the greatest and participated, and the few quotes will always stay with me. I remember when I recorded with that session with Herbie and Jaco in Fort Lauderdale.
Yeah.
And Jaco, let me tell you this, Jaco didn't have much to do with that session. There was a bass player down here named John Goodwin that had talked to Herbie about doing a session for him. That didn't work out. And the timing just had to been there. I had investors on that record. I was 24 years old, hey puppy. And father-in-law just went by there.
Okay.
Is I knew that Herbie was going to be in town doing a gig in Hollywood. So I had the berries. I don't know if I have the berries anymore, you know. John, you know, where's Herbie's thing? This, and this is a tribute to Herbie. Herbie, hi. I got him in this hotel room. I'm a guitar player, Randy Bernsen, and I have I'm gonna try to do a record. Can I send you a cassette? Sure. Cassette. Did you go? You got that right?
Right.
You know, tribute to Herbie Hancock. You know what I mean? Send him a cassette. He goes, man, I'm sorry. This was weeks before the concert because I was trying to make it so the concert we could do it while he was here. So this
Right.
is he goes, great. He goes, look, I'm doing that concert. Yeah, maybe we could do a session, you know, and he goes, yeah. And I checked you out. I talked to Jaco. He says, it's real, it's good. But the thing I'm leaving this part of the conversation is with Herbie said to me before the concert, he goes, I want you to know I'm doing this session because I like your music, not because of Jaco.
Oh, no, I'm sure that must have been like, oh, thank you so much.
Great.
Coming from him, you know.
Just great. I mean, it may, again, that stays with me. But let me say this, Herbie, that sounded like is maybe 25 years later, I saw Herbie at a one of those jazz cruise ships.
Yeah.
And I kept in touch with Herbie a little bit after that in between. But this one time I came to Herbie, he goes, hey, what's happening, man? I said, Herbie, great to see you again, man. And I just want to say that, you know, I'll just never forget what you said, you know. He said, what? He said, that. He goes, oh, I was just kidding.
What?
We laughed. We laughed. You know?
That is something else. You know, you really wonder, but I'm sure he had to have liked it because, you know, knowing that, you know, you knew Jaco and you guys were friends, and I'm sure there was something about your music that had to have been, you know,
Preston,
okay, let me get this.
Bro, I'm going to my deathbed knowing that Herbie, you know, liked the music.
Oh yeah.
He didn't, you know, why would Herbie play on anything that he didn't feel, you know, comfortable with, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
And, you know, the song and the performance that he did speaks for itself. I mean, that California, I think, is just.
Oh, I love that song.
He just smokes it. And Jaco, it's just, I'm very proud of that, you know, so.
You should be. You should be. It's a great recording. Well, listen, my friend, I want to thank you so much for being on Jazz Talk. You're a class act. Love you, man. I love your music. And thank you so much for just taking this time to share your life, your music with me. Hang on. I'm about to close out the show. Well, you've heard it from the great Randy Bernsen. And as the saying goes, if the music grooves and makes you move, it must be jazz. I'm Preston Williams with Jazz Talk signing off. Peace.